everybody. I'm Kay Helm, and this is the Your Voice podcast. Find your voice, tell your story, change the world. Each week, I interview someone about the way in which they live or tell their story, and I hope you find each episode not only inspiring, but also helpful in a practical way. This week, my guest is Bryan. Ethan's an author, musician, storyteller, and passionate fan of the Kansas City Royals. Baseball season's just around the corner. Welcome to the show, Ethan.
Thank you so much. I can't get here fast enough.
And it's cold where you are.
It is so cold. Come on, spring training. Hurry up.
There you go. When does that start?
Pitchers and catchers report in 12 days or 11 days, depending on the team.
Not that you're counting, right?
No, not that I'm counting.
I first I haven't met you, but I kind of met you online through a post about a project that you were working on called America at the Seams. Can you tell us a little bit about that? I just think it's a fascinating project.
America at the Seams is the brainchild of Nathan Ruckert. Nathan is the president of a baseball seams company out of Sioux Falls, South Dakota. And a couple years ago, he had this idea. He makes art out of used baseballs, and he had this idea that he wanted to make something really big and substantial. So he made a map of the United States out of used baseballs, and each state was crafted from baseballs obtained from that state, and those baseballs were connected to specific stories. And so I got the privilege to write the stories for the coffee table book that accompanies the map.
Oh, that's pretty amazing. So did you travel around to different places and you got to meet? So how many people did you interview for this?
I interviewed on average 2 people per state, sometimes 3. But it was just done from the comfort of my own home, mostly emails and phone calls. I did get to do the Missouri story in person, and that was really special. But it was mostly just phone calls. But I'm dying to. I would love the opportunity to play catch with everyone that I got to visit with, and their stories. What was neat, what the concept behind the project, interviews. We were telling them we're going to be short. We just want to know your baseball story, how baseball is a game, more than just a game to you. So just 15, 20 minutes. We don't want to take your time. And we would start talking baseball stories, and baseball stories would connect to life and would connect to faith and would just connect to so much. Wow. And there were so many occasions I had to cut interviews short because it had drained my phone battery. And we talked for 45 minutes, for an hour, for 90 minutes. And it was just an incredible time.
Man, that sounds like fun. And it's working fun at the same time. Yeah.
It really was.
Oh, that's cool. And you talk about playing catch, and you're on a mission that involves playing catch this year, right?
One of my friends called it an epic quest. And I don't know if it's necessarily an epic quest. That makes it think of something like Lord of the Rings, which if you want to put it in the same genre as Lord of the Rings, I am beyond honored. But it is just it was really inspired by my daughters just to try and play catch every day of 2018. And we have already hit our first obstacle of Missouri winters, which have been not cooperative.
Yeah. This has been a kind of a strange winter, I think.
It's been bizarre, but it's fun.
And that's pretty cool. And you're blogging about that too, right?
I have made the commitment. We'll see how it goes, but I'm trying to, like I said, play catch every day, and then just write a short story, post a picture of the person who graciously agreed to entertain me and share a little bit about their story too.
That's awesome. So you tell a lot of stories about baseball. Just that's obviously a great passion of yours, but it's baseball and family and baseball and faith and baseball and life. It's like this combination. So you say on your website, baseball tells the best stories.
Yes.
Yeah. Expand on that a little bit for us.
Oh man, it's so hard. I am convinced everyone has a baseball story, even if they're not a fan of the game, if they're not as ridiculously passionate or obsessive about it as I am. But we have connections to it, whether it's playing Little League or parents that were fans of it. And if you can get someone talking about baseball, which is just, it's just a childhood game about this lighthearted game, then you can connect to those deeper issues in life, those more important things, and not get distracted by the topics of the day, which seem to dominate the news cycle and raise frustrations and tensions between people. One of my friends told me years ago that baseball brings people together. Bob Kendrick, he's the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum. He's such a bright, such a passionate storyteller, and has such an incredible way with words. And he tells stories about how baseball led the way for the civil rights movement, and so using baseball to be able to broach the important things in life, not the distracting things, for example, politics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if we could play games together, and get together and be together on a team and do all those kinds of things, there's that unifying factor. And baseball, I think there's something special about baseball because and this is kind of from my viewpoint, it's such a great individual game and it's such a great team game. It's the perfect combination of team and individual. I mean, all team sports combine those, obviously, but there's just something, you get the one-on-one. It's almost like pitcher and batter, like it's just two people there for a moment. And then, when the bat makes contact, everything, because it's just kind of a neat dynamic.
I completely agree. You have to be willing to do your best, but at the same point, you're playing for the name on the front of the jersey that you are playing for the love of your teams and for love of the game too. Yeah,
yeah. What is there a particular baseball story that is something that you would like highlight to kind of show how baseball does that?
I can do this. I'll stutter my way through it. In 2014, there's this guy from Seoul, South Korea. His name is SungWoo Lee, and he was changing jobs, and he had time in between jobs to come to the United States, to come to Kansas City. He grew up learning to speak English watching baseball games, and he happened to see the Royal Stadium, Kauffman Stadium, broadcast one night and said, "This is the most beautiful stadium," and he became a fan of the Royals. So over the years, Twitter was developed, and then there's this platform on Twitter called Royals Twitter, where obsessive Royals followers tweet along to each other with the highs and lows of each game and season, and it's wonderfully hilarious and obnoxious at the same time. Well, he connected to Royals Twitter, and so sometime in 2012 or so, we became friends on Twitter and conversed back and forth, and he became friends with hundreds of us, and he announced, "I'm going to come to Kansas City. I'm going to spend a week in Kansas City and go see my first Royals games in person."
Nice.
So there was a Royals Twitter formed a welcoming crew, and they took care of everything. And then Kansas City, the city, opened up its doors to him. And
oh, wow.
The story is it actually got turned into an ESPN 30 for 30 documentary, Bring Back SungWoo. But he went out and he was treated to food and museum tours, and everywhere he was going, people wanted to take selfies with him. And he came to the games, and the Royals went on a long winning streak, which propelled them to get into the postseason for the first time in decades.
Oh.
Well, the Royals extended an invitation to him to throw the first pitch at one of his games.
Uh-huh.
And he had been following some of the baseball stories that I had been writing, and he said, "I really like the way you tell stories. You talk about baseball as a game of hope." And so he asked me He said, I have a gift for you. He was here the week of my 40th birthday. I want to give you a present. Will you catch my first pitch for your, and so I got to go out on the field with him and meet players with him, do interviews with him.
Cool.
And catch his first pitch, and we played catch in the parking lot before the game. We played catch in the tunnels, and it was just an absolute delight. The city revolved around, just opened up his doors to a brother from Seoul. And now he has a son, and I am humbly and gratefully called one of his foreign uncles, and I love it.
Oh, that is awesome. I love it.
That's a very short version of it. There's so much more to that story, but the short story of SungWoo Lee coming to Kansas City and the whole city embracing him because of his love of baseball.
Yeah, and that's that togetherness and kind of uniting factor there. You've got other books too, but I do see a string of baseball running through it.
They all have. I have yet to write a book without baseball in it.
Tell us about some of your other projects there.
Well, let's see here. I can quickly walk you through them. My first book was Run Home and Take a Bow, and it's going to 20 different Royals games and asking, what can baseball teach me as a person of faith? What can baseball teach me about life? And that was, I got to connect with a couple of my childhood baseball heroes. That was really fun. Striking out ALS, A Hero's Tale, is right after we moved back to Springfield. One of the very first sports headlines I saw on Sports Page was that Howard Bell was diagnosed with ALS. And I grew up playing baseball with his brother, Bryan. And Howard was enough older than us that he was always making headlines. He played for then Southwest Missouri State, now Missouri State, and was a prospect to be drafted until he got in a wreck with a semi. And so it's the story of connecting with him and walking with him and spending time with him just in his last days struggling with ALS. Catch and Release is the book I was telling you about that I really connected with SungWoo, and literally traveled the country playing catch with people. I've got a couple children's books. Superheroes Are For Real, which I absolutely love the illustrations in that. Just fantastic illustrations. And then a father-son narrative, The Cowboy Year. My dad, his dream growing up was to be a cowboy. And so he found this way to do cowboy action shooting. And I grew up absolutely, for some reason, just terrified of guns. And so it's a story about learning how to play cowboy, learning about gun safety, and how much fun it can be to go out and meeting new friends. And then that book actually features going on the field, I think, with SungWoo's that year. And then new book that just published last year, Dream Field, is my first attempt at it's kind of a fictional memoir. Half of it's ridiculously true and half of it is just dreaming. Oh,
neat. Nice combination.
Yeah.
And people can get those books where?
Well, if you want to go to the best bookstore in the country, it's heartsandmindsbooks.com. Byron Borger has this phenomenal mom and pop shop in Dallastown, Pennsylvania. And I've got to meet him on one occasion, and he is the kind of person, he will mail you a book, and then in the book he'll put a bill and trust that you will send a check to pay for the book.
Wow.
And I love that heart, and I'm willing to pay a little bit more for shipping, just for the experience of working with him and his. Oh man! If you say, "Hey, can you recommend a book about this?" he'll send you an email with 30 book recommendations.
Oh wow!
I'm like, well, I can only afford 2 at this time. and he's just the neatest guy, and he carries all my books. And he is at heartsandmindsbooks.com.
Hearts and
And
minds.
then there's, the big places online. They're all there.
Okay.
I'm going to try and do my best to honor him and not say them by name.
Okay. I'll go with that. And we'll put a link for that in the show notes so that people can go directly there. Yeah, that'd be great. I love that kind of small town feel to that, and that the neighbor, kind of the neighbor, I don't know, is this a word, neighborliness of that? Yes. That's something that I think it almost exists just in our minds, or we're tempted to believe that it doesn't exist anymore sometimes in our busy kind of isolated world. But it does, and it's great to hear that.
If I can follow up with that, a couple of years ago, we got to go to Washington, D.C. when the Royals won the World Series. We received an invitation to go to the White House and join their celebration. And on the way back to Missouri from D.C., we drove up to Pennsylvania because we knew it was the closest we'd be to Bryan. So we go in and went to his store, which their house is in their bookstore.
Uh-huh.
And I was the celebrated author of the day, and he had a table with all my books, a beautiful display. We stayed for probably a couple hours visiting with him and his wife, and spent a couple $100 on books for all of us. And then as we're leaving, they gave us a care package of food.
Oh, wow.
To drive back. And it was just like, it was so unexpected. His wife disappeared for a little bit, and it didn't put one and one together. And she had gone back and prepared a travel package for us. And it lasted almost all the way back to Missouri. We made a pretty hefty dent on it pretty quickly.
Man, that is sweet.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is really cool. Yeah, it's just it's kind of the warm fuzzy, kind of thing. With this podcast, we say find your voice, tell your story, change the world. You obviously are an amazing storyteller, and you see the story, like you're able to see something and see the story in it. How do you cultivate that? Is that like a gift? Is it something that you decided, now how can I do this? Well, where's that come from?
That's a really good question. I would say that I have intentionally been studying and learning about stories now for probably 15-ish years.
Okay.
15, 16 years. I was trying to learn, reading books about story concepts and story design.
Mm-hmm.
And what's funny is, there are similarities between them all, but even when you read, you're like, oh yeah, I forgot about that, and constantly being reminded of what a story is. And I think what I've realized, we connect with as humans, and we remember stories so much better than just facts and numbers that are spewed out. And so to be able to look for ways to talk about the things that are common to all of us, but then also to phrase and what is unique, what are my unique struggles, what are my difficulties, and then even as I share what I think is unique and just a personal struggle, when you're able to phrase that in the form of a story, you'll have someone else come up to you and say, I know exactly what you mean. And it opens up windows into their story as well. And so all that to say that I try to view each day as a story. And that's what's been neat about the Catch Project, is to try and connect the little blogs that I do to the story of the day.
Yeah, that's good. I think sometimes even like we do this with art, we do this with a lot of creative endeavors, that we kind of look at other people that do it. So somebody could be listening to, how you've put together all these stories and say, wow, that's really awesome. I could never do that. And that's one of the points of this podcast, is to tell people you can. There are ways you can learn, and you can nourish if you have the desire to learn to do something, you can continue to educate yourself. You have things that you're observing, so you have things that you're drawn to, that you tend to find the stories there. But you're right, we connect through stories. And I work with a nonprofit, and it's when you read about how do we tell what we're doing, how do we share the impact, it's stories are where we really connect.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so it's such a...
What nonprofit do you work?
I work with Tributaries International, and we do mental health training in the developing world.
Oh, wow.
So you get places that don't have many psychologists or psychiatrists, but everybody struggles in many areas, no matter where you live in the world. There are just the struggles of life. And then if you have, large amounts of conflict or poverty or natural disasters, and you start throwing those things in, and there aren't a lot of resources. So it's really a capacity building type of thing. We go in and do training. So we don't go do counseling, but we go train other people, and it'll be informal people. So you don't have to go through years of college. We're not certifying or licensing people, but instead sharing, here's how you listen to someone and listen to their story. And here's how you recognize things that need a little more attention. And here's how you connect with those resources. And here's what's available in your country. And we get that actually from them. We bring people together and network them. And it's just really, it is a powerful thing. I'll share a short story.
Please.
In one place, we had if somebody's behavior changes suddenly, or say somebody's getting older and they're forgetting things, not just forgetting things, but they're getting up and wandering around at night and things like that. That's a big sign of dementia. But in that context, the explanation is sorcery, because there just isn't the knowledge of, and people a lot of times don't have access to things like the internet. They can't go look it up or something. And so it's kind of just what's been handed down as an explanation. And so we had done a training, and there was a pastor there that recognized these signs in his mother. And it was a gift to him to have a different understanding now of what was happening with her. And then he shared that with his family, and then with his community, his church, and then his community. And it was cool because he was sharing the story, and he just throws his shoulders back, and you could almost see the cape flying behind him. He says, "They call me the defender of old women," because it's just, he's changed the way people think about those changes that the older women in the community and the older men are going through. And so, of course, because the changing thinks, then the response thinks. Or the response, the thinking. Let me get that right. Because the thinking changes, then the response to those people changes, and of course, then they're treated a lot better as a result. And so that's storytelling.
That's really cool.
But it's the story that connects you. I can say, well, we go and we teach a class, and it's a 5-day course, and people stay for 40 hours, and they get this training, and they learn things that they hadn't known before, and it changes paradigms and all. And what you hear is blah 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 blah. But if I tell the story, you go, I know somebody with dementia, and I know somebody who's struggling to understand what's happening with their loved one. And I know that if they had 5 or 6 tips on things they could do or if they just understood what might be coming at them next, how that might help. Boom, now I'm connected.
That is, yeah. And it's funny, as you're talking about that, I was thinking about people and friends that I know that have dementia. Like you said, the story connects.
It does. And even before we started recording this episode, I had shared with you a story of playing catch with my dad, and what a special moment that was. And it brings us to another level of understanding. I think just the stories reach into a place that just mere facts and information can't reach.
Yeah, it's a lot like music. One of the things that's beautiful about music is it subverts our brain and goes straight to our heart, and it kind of, the Greeks say that music organized the big places in our heart, that it put them back together.
Mm.
and stories do that to us, that our brain relaxes, and we don't try and figure out all the details. What did this really happen? Did this really happen? But we're able to trust the story itself as a unit, and lean into the deeper truths that it expresses.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's powerful when we can do that. And so that power that comes in being the one that tells the story is really important. And I think that, did you feel a responsibility when you were interviewing people for any of these books, any of these projects? What kind of responsibility do you feel that you have as the author of the stories?
The first one is you want to get the story right.
Mm-hmm.
You want to make sure that the facts are straight, and that it's true. And so usually I'll write a very, very, right after I interview someone, I'll write a very rough draft, and it's horrible, and I know it's horrible. There's Anne Lamott, what she says about first drafts is so true. But then I'll send it to them, and I'll just say, all right, do I have the basic information right? Is this true? And then once I have everything straight in my brain, what I really like to do is just take some time and sit with it, and just think about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'll read over the notes, and then I'll get away from the screen, and I'll go do something physical, whether it's playing catch, whether it's exercising, going for a bike ride, going for a walk, and just let the facts of the story simmer for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing when you give it that space and that time, and you can come back and find other ways of telling the story that bring out the beauty of it, where it's not just a recollection of facts, but it is a representation of a life in words. So
that's good.
That's my process and thinking when I'm trying to tell the stories. When someone reads something that I've written about them, I want them to be really proud of it. Yeah. That's what I'm thinking.
And what are some reactions that you've gotten? Do you have some memorable moments where you've shared back a story and somebody has, looked now at their story in a different way or seen it for the first time?
Well, I was doing some research on Buck O'Neil. He was one of my favorite players, managers from the Negro Leagues time. He managed the Kansas City Monarchs and played baseball in a time when it was segregated. He never got into the major leagues to play.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was reading some of his writings, watching some of his interviews and stuff, and I wrote about him as a fictional perspective, like writing that I had met him, which I never got the opportunity to do. And in this writing was interviewing him and talking with him, dialoguing with him. So I sent it to my friend Bob Kendrick, who I mentioned, who's the president of the Negro Leagues Baseball Museum, mm-hmm. and said, all right, you know Buck best. I mean, you guys have worked together for years. You've traveled this country together. How is this? And he responded a couple of days later. He says, this sounds exactly like him. And that I did a good job of capturing his heart in the story. And that meant a lot. Yeah,
I'm sure that did. Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you can do that. But and you did your homework and just kind of as in studying somebody, and you can get to know someone if you do the work like that, like you've done.
I think it's just it's giving the story space to live and space to grow, and the hard thing, like with a daily blog, is that you don't have enough time to let the story sit and simmer.
Yeah.
And so I'm afraid to go back and read some of the stories because I know they're not going to have everything that I want. But you do what you can with time limitations.
Mm-hmm.
But man, as stories have that time to process and just to to dive into your subconscious, and you'll find connections that you had no idea were there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's true, that processing time, and that's kind of, some of the time management, techniques in the, that the productivity guys are always teaching. They'll do that, work for 25 minutes and then take a 10-minute break. And there's something scientifically, proven about that, getting up and getting away from the doing of the work. Take a little walk, stand up and stretch, focus your eyes a different way, do something, go outside, get a deep breath, that it somehow reorganizes the information and the connections in our brain, just taking that break. And so in a way, when you said you get up and you do something physical, or, whether it's minutes or days, you give space really to create those pathways that your story gets to run on. Yeah. So I think that's great advice. Is there a book that you would recommend people read, or something you would point them to as a resource to tell better stories?
My favorite one. Oh man, there's a lot. There's one by Donald Miller, A Million Miles in 1,000 Years, and it is fantastic. There's one by William Zinsser, On Writing Well. Mm-hmm. Anything and Everything by Robert Benson is just incredible about how he tells stories. Just fantastic. If you want a baseball book about concept of story and just how to shape a story, there's one called The Soul of Baseball by Joe Posnanski. I don't know that there's been a better baseball book written.
So I would recommend then, if you're listening to this podcast and you're saying, gee, I know all these touch on interesting things, interesting people, or I'd like to write a story, or maybe even I've never written before, but it's something I'm interested in, something I've always wanted to do. Those are places to start. And, what's your advice for somebody that's in that position? How do you start?
I've been very fortunate to make a connection with Robert Benson. And he has really mentored me as a writer. And one of his suggestions is 600 words a day. You write 600 words. You stop in the middle of a sentence, stop in the middle of a paragraph, and then you go back and read what you wrote, and you have good momentum to pick up the next day. That especially for young writers or for new writers, that we try and write too much too fast. And so, 600 words, 2 pages, double spaced. So it's not a lot, but it's enough to get the synapses firing and the creative juices flowing.
Yeah, that's good.
And then just be faithful about it. Don't give up too soon. Just keep at it and just keep. Benson said, he told me there's a need for good sentences and good stories in this world, and don't give up telling yours too soon.
Yeah, that's great advice. That's one of the things I found helpful with my writing is, do it in the morning, right? And just get words on page. Don't worry about structure yet. That's what rewriting and editing is for. But when you're just getting that consistency down, and then I haven't tried I think I'm going to try it. I haven't done the, stop mid-sentence and then pick up the next day. But before I end the morning session, I will write a prompt for the next day.
Yep.
And so I know when I get up, when I'm done writing on day one, my brain knows what I'm going to be writing about the next day. And even though I may not consciously think about that the rest of the day, somehow by the time I wake up the next morning and sit down at my computer, my brain has thought about it. And I actually have something to write when I sit down, which is a really cool thing. And it's very encouraging when that
happens. It is. And sometimes you'll dream about it too.
Oh, yeah. I haven't had that one yet, but that would be wonderful. Yeah. So it's just kind of giving yourself freedom, I think, to just do it. Just sit down and not worry that you're not getting graded on it. You're not, I think that's a lot of our experience. A lot of times the only writing we've really done has been for a class or for somebody or for something where we're getting judged on it right off the bat. And so we try to write like this finished grand thing, right off the bat, or we're trying to, I'm using baseball terms right off the bat. And, but, because it's a part of us, it's a part of the way we tell stories, right? We use those terms. We try to get it perfect, but just get it out.
Exactly. The perfect will come.
Yeah.
And perfect is a myth.
Yeah.
Getting the story out there is much more important than worrying about perfect.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Ethan, I thank you so much for coming and joining us on the show. And I think I'm trying to decide which one of your books to start with.
I think my calling as a writer is mostly to be a feel-good writer, to try and leave the reader with a smile and a renewed feeling of hope.
I think we need more of that.
So if you need a good laugh with several 90s pop culture references, start with Dreamfield. If you got kids, superheroes are for real. It's a blast. It's a children's picture book. It takes you 2 minutes to read it.
Cool.
And if you want to make the investment in a coffee table book, America at the Seams, there are some stories in there that still blow me away. Girls playing ball and the struggles that they had to go through, or the Cleveland Indians general manager who makes an appointment with his dad every month still to play catch. They've been doing it now for 40 or 30-something years.
Nice.
And, I got to interview Jim Morris, who is the guy that the movie The Rookie is based off of, and hear his story. And just they're all really short stories, only a couple pages apiece. But it's amazing to see the beautiful things that are being done across the states just through a simple game.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Ethan, thanks.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you so much, Kay.
This has been the Your Voice podcast. Make sure you check the show notes. We'll have the links to the very special bookstore. That website is, our website is yourvoicepodcast.com again, and the show notes will be on this episode's page. And I'll ask you to leave a review on iTunes, wherever you listen, whether that's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Store. And what that does for us is that it helps other people find the show. I'm Kay Hill. Until next time, this is the Your Voice podcast. Find your voice, tell your story, change the world.